And they called me up and they made an offer. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it.
Why? In 2006, a movie came out that nobody expected to matter. It cost $35 million. It made $326 million. And then it just stayed. In the culture, in the quotes, in the way every single person who has ever had a terrible boss looked at Meryl Streep and felt deeply, personally understood. 20 years passed. No sequel, no announcement, just a movie that refused to go away. And then against every expectation, against the public statements of its two biggest stars, it came back. This is how that happened, and why it almost didn't. The book that started everything. In 2003, a woman named Lauren Weisberger published a novel. It was called The Devil Wears Prada. It was about a young journalist who goes to work for the most powerful, most terrifying fashion editor in New York City. It was also very obviously about her real life. Weisberger had worked as an assistant to Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief of Vogue, the most powerful woman in fashion. A woman so intimidating that her staff reportedly stopped talking when she walked into a room and didn't start again until she left. The novel was a hit, but what happened next was even faster than anyone predicted. 20th Century Fox bought the film rights before the book was even finished. The studio executive had read only the first 100 pages and an outline. That was enough. There was just one condition. The film would not be greenlit, not a single camera would roll until Meryl Streep said yes. Everything was riding on one phone call. Meryl said no, then she said something smarter. When the offer came in, Meryl read the script. And she liked it. She knew it was going to be a hit. She said so herself, years later. But she didn't say yes. She said no. She turned down the first offer completely and waited to see what would happen next. The studio came back, and this time Meryl doubled her ask. The studio said yes immediately. And Meryl, who was in her mid-50s at the time, later told her castmates on a Today Show interview, "It took me that long to understand I could do that. They needed me. I could feel it." That was Miranda Priestley's first power move. Before a single frame was shot, the rest of the casting fell into place. Anne Hathaway, still mostly known as the girl from Princess Diaries, came in as Andy Sachs for $1 million. Her first ever 7-figure salary. Emily Blunt was 23 years old. Stanley Tucci was 45. And on the very first day of filming, Meryl walked up to Anne Hathaway, looked her in the eye and said, "I think you're perfect for this role. I'm so happy we're going to be working together." Then she paused and followed it with, "That is the last nice thing I will say to you." And it was. 57 days, New York, Paris. One monologue that changed everything. Principal photography ran for 57 days, mostly New York, some Paris. Costume designer Patricia Field, the woman behind Sex and the City, pulled pieces from actual designer archives. Real Chanel, real Valentino, real Prada. The cerulean monologue where Miranda explains, in barely a whisper, how a blue sweater travels from a Paris runway to a bargain bin was not in the original novel. Screenwriter Aline Brosh McKenna wrote it. And when she saw Meryl deliver it on set for the first time, she reportedly threw her arm in front of the director like they were in a car wreck. That is what it felt like to watch Meryl Streep become Miranda Priestley in real time. June 30th, 2006. The film opened. $35 million budget. $326 million worldwide. 9.3 times its cost.
So I used to have your job. Got to go to Paris Fashion Week. What?
And 20 years later, the sequel made 72% of that entire Lifetime number in a single weekend. Meryl won the Golden Globe, got an Oscar nomination, and gave the world a villain who wasn't really a villain, just a woman who was very, very good at her job and completely unwilling to apologize for it. And then nothing. Conversations about a sequel started as early as 2009. Quietly, behind closed doors, studio executives talking to producers, producers talking to agents. But nothing made it past that stage, because two people had already made their position very clear. Meryl Streep was not interested. Anne Hathaway wanted to do something completely different with the same people. And that was it. Years passed. In 2013, Lauren Weisberger published the sequel novel, Revenge Wears Prada, The Devil Returns. It became a bestseller. The studio circled again. Scripts were developed. Ideas were pitched. Every single one went nowhere. Because you cannot make The Devil Wears Prada without Miranda Priestley. And you cannot have Miranda Priestley without Meryl Streep. So the sequel just waited. For 11 years. 2024. The idea that finally worked. In July 2024, Disney, which now owned 20th Century Studios, made a call to Aline Brosh McKenna, the same writer who cracked the original. The question was simple. Is there a version of this story that actually makes sense to tell in 2024? McKenna looked at the world. Print media was dying. Fashion magazines were closing. Instagram and TikTok had eaten the advertising dollars that kept Runway alive. Anna Wintour had stepped down as editor-in-chief of Vogue after 36 years. The whole industry that the original film celebrated had shifted under everyone's feet. That was the story. Miranda Priestly, the most powerful woman in fashion, trying to survive in a world that no longer needs her kind of power. And Andy Sachs, her former assistant, coming back to Runway as a features editor. Not as a girl learning the rules, as a woman who now knows them better than anyone. McKenna wrote the script, and one by one, Meryl said yes, Anne said yes, Emily Blunt said yes, Stanley Tucci said yes, director David Frankel said yes, producer Wendy Fineman said yes. All of them, back, together, for the first time in 20 years. The budget? $100 million, nearly 3 times the original. When a reporter in London asked Meryl what was different about making the sequel, she looked straight into the camera and said 8 words.
It was true. I think I've talked to Greta about it. That was true with Barbie a little bit, in comparison to what they spend on other films. This one, honey, they spent the money.
This one, honey, they spent the money. June 30th, 2025, cameras roll. Again, exactly 19 years after the original wrap, principal photography began on June 30th, 2025. Manhattan, the same streets, the same building exterior. The Runway offices rebuilt at Kaufman Astoria Studios, this time 8 times larger than the original set. Because this time, there was no barely adequate resources. This time, every door opened the moment someone said the words, "Devil Wears Prada." Kenneth Branagh joined as Miranda's estranged husband. Lucy Liu, Justin Theroux as the corporate villain, Simone Ashley, Lady Gaga. In September, Meryl and Stanley flew to Milan to film at Dolce & Gabbana's Fashion Week show. Real Fashion Week, real runway, October Milan. Donatella Versace filmed a cameo. Lady Gaga recorded an original song called Runway with Doechi that became the sonic heartbeat of the entire film. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Sydney Sweeney showed up on set. Her scene was eventually cut. Even a cameo in this film was news. February 1st, 2026. The trailer, it dropped during the Grammy Awards, 2 minutes and 22 seconds. 222 million views in 24 hours. The most viewed trailer in 20th Century Studios' entire history. People were not just excited, people were emotional, because this wasn't just a sequel. For an entire generation, this was a film that had followed them through first jobs and terrible bosses and ambition that cost them something real. And now, it was back. April 2026. The cover, nobody saw coming. Anna Wintour. The real woman Miranda Priestly was built on appeared on the cover of Vogue alongside Meryl Streep. The fictional editor and the actual editor, side by side. 20 years after the film made one of them a global icon and made the other one say privately that she found the whole thing rather amusing. That cover was not promotion. That cover was history. May 1st, 2026. Opening weekend, $77 million. Domestic, opening weekend alone, $239 million worldwide. The 7th highest grossing film of 2026. The biggest opening weekend of Meryl Streep's entire career, beating Mamma Mia, which itself had been a phenomenon. The biggest international opening of Emily Blunt's career, beating Oppenheimer. Rotten Tomatoes, 78% critics. Audience score, 88%, 12 points higher than the original. At the Lincoln Center premiere in New York, Meryl, Anne, Emily and Stanley walked the red carpet together for the first time in 20 years. 4 people, 1 film, 1 idea that started with 100 unfinished pages in 2003, and a sequel that almost never existed. Lauren Weisberger wrote a novel about her terrible boss. Hollywood turned it into a $326 million movie. And 20 years later, after a sequel nobody believed would happen, 2 stars who said they weren't interested, 11 years of scripts that went nowhere, and 1 idea that finally fit the world we're actually living in, Miranda Priestly, came back and reminded everyone that the most dangerous people are not the ones who shout. They're the ones who whisper and make you lean in to hear them. If you want to know what happened to every single actor in this film, where they went, what they built, and what they survived between 2006 and 2026, that video is already on the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a good time. This is Star Allies, and we are just getting started.